News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Lisa Mateo.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
Karen, we begin with geopolitics and President Trump's comments on a variety of global issues over the weekend. The president spoke about the war in Ukraine after indicating he was ready to ramp up sanctions on Russia without providing details. He spoke with reporters at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland.
I settled 7 wars. This, I would have said, would have been maybe the easiest one to settle of all. But with war, you never know what you're getting. But we're going to get it. I believe we're going to get it settled. But I am not happy with them. I'm not happy with anything having to do with that war.
President Trump's comments come as a massive Russian air assault struck a key government building in Kyiv, killing at least 4 people and injuring dozens.
And Lisa, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is also commenting on secondary sanctions over the weekend, saying it could lead to an eventual deal.
If the U.S. and the EU can come in, do more sanctions, secondary tariffs on the countries that buy Russian oil, the Russian economy will be in full collapse, and that will bring President Putin to the table.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent made those comments on NBC's Meet the Press, heard Sundays right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Meanwhile, Karen, the EU preparing new sanctions and secondary tariffs on oil and banks to further squeeze Russia's economy and pressure Vladimir Putin to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. The possible package comes as a delegation of EU officials head to Washington this week to discuss the potential for joint action.
And Lisa, the president also commented on the Israel-Gaza war. In a post on social media, President Trump wrote that Hamas needs to accept his terms to end the fighting, writing, "This is my last warning." Last week, President Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, sent a new proposal to Hamas for a hostage and ceasefire deal. The president talked about the prospects of a deal last night.
It's a hell of a problem. Again, it's a problem we want to solve for the Middle East, for Israel, for everybody. But it's a problem we're going to get done. So they have hostages. It could be a little bit less than 20 because some, they tend to die, right? They tend to die. Even though they're young people largely, they're dying.
President Trump's proposed deal would reportedly include the release of all remaining hostages in exchange for ending the war in Gaza.
Turning now to Boston, Karen, well, federal immigration agents conducted raids across the city and nearby communities, arresting dozens of people. The Justice Department filed suit against the city and its mayor, intensifying a clash over local sanctuary policies, with Attorney General Mamdani calling Boston among the worst sanctuary offenders in America. President Trump has also threatened to send forces into Chicago to tackle crime.
We're not going to war. We're going to clean up our cities. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense.
President Trump's Borders Czar Tom Homan is further promising enforcement activities in Chicago and other sanctuary cities across the country.
Meanwhile, in New York, Lisa, Zohran Mamdani, the frontrunner in the city's mayoral race, says the city should brace itself for a deployment of National Guard troops.
We have to prepare for the inevitability of that deployment. We cannot try and convince ourselves that because something is illegal, Donald Trump will not do it.
New York City mayoral frontrunner Zohran Mamdani made the comments at a rally with Senator Bernie Sanders over the weekend. President Trump has so far deployed National Guard troops in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Well, turning overseas now, in a major story in Paris, France's government could collapse today, with Prime Minister François Bayrou expected to lose a confidence vote in Parliament. Bayrou called the vote in a bid to pressure lawmakers into backing his budget plan, which includes spending cuts and tax hikes. Earlier, Prime Minister Bayrou spoke on French television.
We are experiencing a situation that threatens the very future of the country, and everyone is whistling as if it doesn't exist. Everyone is looking the other way. Everyone is using the answers we could have provided to gain electoral advantage.
François Bayrou speaking through an interpreter. If the government collapses, President Emmanuel Macron could name a new prime minister or call fresh elections for the National Assembly.
In Georgia this weekend, Lisa, federal agents detained 475 people at Hyundai's manufacturing complex as part of a months-long investigation into employment practices. The majority were Korean nationals, and people working unlawfully were turned over to ICE for removal proceedings. Hyundai said it was closely monitoring the situation, adding that production at its electric vehicle assembly plant nearby was not interrupted.
And over in Asia, Shigeru Ishiba has announced that he will step down as Japan's prime minister. Now, this move follows calls for his resignation after back-to-back election losses that cost his party its parliamentary majority. However, with no clear successor, his departure is likely to fuel uncertainty among investors. Japan's currency has already slid against the dollar on concerns political instability will reduce the prospect of the Bank of Japan raising rates. Checking now, the yen, it is down about 0.2% at 147.82 against the dollar. And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Lisa Mateo.
I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.